I'd make two sets of points about how I think about the world at a macro level. The first point is that we are in a multipolar world, and I believe we have been in a multipolar world since 2017. I was born in 1947, born into a bipolar world, which went away basically in the 1989-91 period when the Cold War ended, and we then saw the Soviet Union break apart in 1991. And from 1991 to 2017, I cannot emphasize this enough, we lived in a unipolar world where by definition there was no great power politics. You can't have great power politics when there's only one great power. It was a unique period in modern history, and it was actually a remarkably peaceful period, certainly from the point of view of great power politics. We are now in a multipolar world for the first time since 1945. Multipolar worlds are very dangerous. Never want to lose sight of that. There are three great powers. The United States is numero uno, China is a close number two, and Russia is a distant number three. And the US-China competition is going to be the defining competition of the 21st century, the competition between those two great powers. So that's what you want to keep in mind. My second cut from a macro level has to do with how the United States thinks about the world. It's important to understand that the Western Hemisphere is the most important area of the world for the United States. It always has been, and it always will be. The reason we pay so little attention to the Western Hemisphere from a strategic point of view is because the United States is a regional hegemon in the Western Hemisphere. We are Godzilla. We face no security threats whatsoever in the Western Hemisphere. That allows us to worry about other regions of the world. I often say to students, have you thought about why the United States is wandering all over God's little green acre, sticking its nose in every country's business? The answer is very simple. It's because we're a regional hegemon and we're free to roam. So then the question is, what areas of the world really matter to the United States? From 1776 or 1783, when we got our independence, up until about 2017, the most important area of the world for the United States outside of the Western Hemisphere was Europe. We always had a Europe first policy. The other two areas that mattered were East Asia and the Persian Gulf. East Asia because there were other great powers there, and the Gulf because of the oil. Since 2017, for the first time in our history, we no longer have a Europe first policy. East Asia is now the most important area of the world outside of the Western Hemisphere. And again, I want to emphasize that the Western Hemisphere is the most important area, it's just that we have no threats there. So when you think about the world today, the two most important things to keep in mind at a macro level are, number one, we live in a multipolar world, and multipolar worlds are very dangerous. And number two, the United States, which has historically focused almost all of its attention on Europe, has begun to pivot away from Europe and pivot to East Asia, because that's where China is, and China is the real peer competitor.
Thank you, John. And just to put a fine point on, we know what happened in 1990, 91 when that non-polar world began. 2017, simply the advent of the Trump administration changed that perspective from Europe to East Asia?
I mean, Trump did that, but what happened in 2017 was a result of structural factors. First of all, Putin basically comes to power in very late 1999, and then between 99 and 2017, he brings Russia back from the dead. And with regard to China, starting in the 1990s, early 1990s, we pursue, foolishly, a policy of engagement toward China. We go to great lengths to help China grow economically. And as almost all of you know, China does grow in a remarkably impressive way from the early 90s up until about 2017. So by 2017, it has so much economic might on top of that huge population that can easily turn it into enough military power to qualify as a great power. So what Trump does is Trump abandons engagement. Very important to understand this. Trump comes in, engagement goes down the toilet bowl, and we, for the first time, adopt the policy of containment toward China. But it's only because China has grown economically and therefore militarily so powerful.
With that type of engagement, I'm just going to add one last follow-up. Do you think without Trump, that type of turn in U.S. policy would have occurred around that time? Or
yes,
eventually?
it would have occurred anyway. Just 2 quick points on that. One is Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State in 2011, was the first person to enunciate the pivot to Asia because she understood that China was rising. But it was not executed by the Obama administration.
Right.
It was Trump who did it. Second point, and this is very important, Joe Biden, who was an arch proponent of engagement when he was the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and when he was vice president, he becomes president, as you all remember, in 2020 after Obama. The question you want to ask yourself is, does Biden go back to engagement or does he stick to containment? In fact, he not only sticks to containment, he doubles down on containment, which I think tells you that Trump mattered for sure, but it didn't really matter for structural reasons.
Yeah.
China is located in East Asia. And our principal concern about China is that it will become a regional hegemon like the United States is in the Western Hemisphere. We don't want them to imitate us. As I said to you folks before, and you always want to remember this, the reason that we are free to roam around the world and stick our nose in every country's business is because we are so secure in the Western Hemisphere. What we want is for China to be pinned down in East Asia and have to worry about the local balance of power. We want to put great limits on its ability to roam. So that's our number one goal with regard to China. Our second goal is to make sure that they don't develop a blue water navy that allows them to challenge us in a serious way on the world seas. The third major concern, and this is where Latin America comes in, is that they will try to project military power into the Western Hemisphere and in effect violate the Monroe Doctrine. There's no question that economically the Chinese are already involved in the Western Hemisphere. But the question is, will we have something like the Cuban Missile Crisis down the road? That's the really big issue. And of course, I would advise any country in the Western Hemisphere to go to great lengths to make sure that nothing that looks like a violation of the Monroe Doctrine ever happens, because that would lead to untold trouble. But you want to understand what's going on here with regard to the US-China competition, and here I'm piggybacking on what Brian said. The United States has never confronted a security competitor as formidable as China. The two building blocks of military power are population size and wealth. And during the Cold War, when it was the United States versus the Soviet Union, you had two countries that had roughly the same size population. And in terms of wealth, the ability to generate wealth, develop sophisticated technologies, we were superior to the Russians or to the Soviets, right? So we had significant advantages during the Cold War. We are now up against a competitor that has 4 times the population of the United States and may not only be able to compete with us, but may beat us in terms of developing sophisticated technologies. The Chinese are truly impressive, as anybody who's gone to China knows. They got a lot of people, a lot of gross national product, and they are going to compete with us all over the world. And this is the situation that you're describing, and you folks all know better than I do, that you see in the Western Hemisphere. Chinese penetration, sophisticated Chinese technologies that you'd like to buy for all the obvious reasons. That situation is not likely to change to our advantage, our meaning the United States. I worry that it's going to change to their advantage. So there's going to be more Chinese influence. I think largely economic, maybe ideological, maybe coercive along the lines you're describing. If it's military, then you begin to violate the Monroe Doctrine. But even if you don't violate the Monroe Doctrine, that US-China competition that I described before, which is the centerpiece of multipolarity, is going to have a profound effect on your lives moving forward. My final point that I want to emphasize, this is to show you how remarkably foolish the United States has been. We, starting in the early 1990s, decided to help China grow economically. We purposely helped China become the great power that it is today. You were bad-mouthing the World Trade Organization. We let the Chinese into the World Trade Organization in 2001. And by the way, this policy of engagement, I was one of the few people on the planet who opposed it, was pursued by both Democrats and Republicans. So it's not like the Democrats are the bad guys or the Republicans are the bad guys. And the end result is we created Godzilla. And now we have to try to figure out how to live with it.